yo. Yo, yo, yo. So, today we're going to be covering pads in a couple of different ways. And the reason why is because there's obviously multiple ways to achieve these kinds of sounds. For the most part, I'm using instances of Falcon. So let's just take a listen to what some of these are. Here's an instance of Serato sample. And here are some vocals that I recorded with my own voice using some auto-tune. And this one. These two are pretty much the same. I just used a Nectar auto-tune to try to see if I can get this more in key, which is always F harmonic minor for me. Not always, but most of the time. So yeah, how does one achieve a sound like this? Well, there's multiple ways to do it, but let's talk about the most important components. First off is reverb. Turning something up with a ton of reverb is automatically going to give you a spatial sound. So without this, it sounds pretty shitty, right? But if you add a crap ton of reverb, which is a stock plugin on Ableton, and I've experimented with all different kinds of reverbs, and you can talk about convolution versus plate and whatever, but just throw a reverb on there and keep it simple. It automatically sounds like it has so much more. The other stuff is arbitrary with like EQ. Normally, typical practice is taking out the lows because you don't want bass in your pads unless if it's like the only sound that you have going, or some multi-band compression. I throw OTT on almost everything. But yeah, with this combination of like some simple EQ and some reverb, you can also do delays, which I'll pull up the effects on this. I have some saturation. This is a convolution reverb, some more reverb, and some delay. Now, the reason why I generally choose Falcon for pads is because it just has so many options that are really fantastic. These are all songs that I have in my song library, and generally what I do is I'll just take any of these and throw it in and start chopping this up. If I take all of these off, actually let me go to edit and then turn the effects off, then you'll see that the sounds that we get which, still kind of cool, I guess. But basically, like, if you have a granular synth and then it's only playing like one instance right there, as you can see, it's moving super slow, then that's the kind of thing that you want to draw out and start bringing out with your effects. So, we have our saturation and our reverb, which is already doing a lot. Then spark verb, which is another reverb. You can kind of hear that there's a buzzing that's really annoying. That's why I kind of evened it out with a filter. And then there's some dual delay that's just going to give it some more stereo. So yeah, these pads sound really awesome, but the problem is that I don't know what the tone is. I don't know, sometimes you'll create stuff that's atonal, which is fine, but sometimes you're trying to figure out what the pitch is when you're trying to match it up to the key of your song. So what are some ways that we can match that, or basically figure out what that is? There's a few ways to do it. I'm going to pull up an instance of the M analyzer. The typical thing that people like to use is Vox signal span, which is totally fine too. I just like how this looks, which is pretty cool. But basically I'm going to try and play a note and see if I can find the fundamental frequency of whatever it is that's playing. So for me, what I would look at first is the biggest peak, or the largest peak. Now there's, of course, like, because it's an entire song, you're going to have more tones that are playing, but at least having that A sharp right there is something to go off of. Now I can also pull up an instance of a parametric EQ would be best. And let's see if I can find that same A sharp. So it's kind of interesting because the peak that was coming up on Melda is different than the kind of peaks that I'm getting on Pro Q. So it's kind of up to you about how you go about shaping this and whatnot, but it's also a little bit different as well because for some reason the octaves on here are shifted one below or like one above. It's basically just a little bit off. And what I mean by that is we're looking at A0 as, as 30 hertz, which typically would be like A minus 1. If we go up to here, this is like a F2 or an F3. This is representing itself as F3 on 174 hertz, but actually it should be an F2. So just keep that in mind whenever you guys are using these kinds of things. Basically what you can do is you can just take an EQ like this. Actually, let me go back and use a bandpass instead. It doesn't matter. Find something with a lot of resonance and try to see if you can find the fundamental frequency of whatever it is that's playing. So the other thing too is like if you really feel like getting surgical with it, then you can really just kind of like cheat it and just take the stuff that you want. But that's kind of like a false or pseudo way of shaping the kinds of tones that you want. And generally, like, you want the full sound. So, it is kind of a challenge to figure out what the root is, especially when you're using tools like this to kind of analyze, but there is another way that might be a little bit easier for us. Here I have an instance of Serato sample, and I have this pad that I froze from something similar to this. So if I play this fully, so when I first threw the sample in, I had it basically detect the pitch for me, which came out as B flat minor or A sharp minor, and that means that if I play a C, or I play this at its natural tone, then it's going to basically play an A minor. So for me, I can use a Serato sample to tune it to the tuning that I want. And I can get at least a little bit closer to that. Now the thing to keep in mind is that if you throw an entire track in here and you're only using one section, it doesn't mean that the note is going to be at the key of what it is that you're playing in. It means it's going to play at the key of what the song is changed to. If I pull in, I prefer to pull in something that's mine. So if I pull in an instance of copycat, or copy that, it detects that it's an F minor, which is true because I made the track in F minor. But if there's a tone on here for something, let me go to find samples. And I change it, then it will basically play the entire track at that key. So it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever note that you're playing is there. But what you can do is you can take a single tone, kind of like, let me play this. So you can take a single tone that's just playing that and then throw that into Serato. Which looks like it was the same thing that I had from earlier, which is playing in B flat, and you can find your chops, or you can play it on the key scale. So you can take that instance and play it that way, and that will basically tune the sample for you. It's kind of a long process, but it's kind of important to know too, because we need to figure out not only how to make this stuff, but figure out how to use it in context. And that's ultimately one of the biggest challenges of doing crazy granular sound design and whatnot. So I think that that was kind of a long-winded explanation about how to find the key of something, but it's important to look at some strategies about how we can go about figuring those things out, especially if you don't have like perfect pitch recognition or even relative pitch recognition. I guess one final strategy that is important is that you can also do the opposite. So if I throw a sample into here, let's just find an actual song just for the sake of demonstration. I'm going to throw in Existentialism, which is one of the last tracks that I came out with, which is in F minor, right? Well, now that I know that that's an F minor, I can go in to Falcon and then pull up a new song or pull up Existentialism, wherever that is on this, throw that in and then set the root to F. And it might not play like F minor, but I know that that's going to be the natural key of it. So if I play F, then the song is going to play at its natural key. If I play C, then it's going to transpose it back down to C and B, even if the notes and stuff aren't within that. But it at least puts me in the ballpark of what key it's in. So even if I'm doing something that's in the middle of all this and I don't know the exact note, I'll at least know that it's supposed to be within the key of the song that I'm working in, if that makes sense. And try to think about how you can, come up with your own pads or come up with your own resampling strategies, so that way, your stuff is usable. Because what's the point of making cool sounds if you don't even know how to, use it in the context of a song? But yeah, that was a pretty long-winded tutorial, but hopefully that was informative to you guys about how to figure out all this stuff. It's not too complicated to make. It's kind of more complicated to figure out how to use. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I've said that like 6 times. Anyways, if you guys have any questions, then hit me up. Make sure to give me a follow or subscribe and stuff if you guys like the sound design videos that I've been making.